Special thanks to Horizon Therapeutics for sponsoring the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast, working tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics' mission at horizontherapeutics.com.
He's compassionate. He asked great questions. Yesterday morning, he said, out of the blue, because I was doing his morning routine. So this is 6:30 in the morning. Ryan says, "What makes a good marriage?" Where did that come from?
Yeah. Those are our guests this week, Chris and Jessica Patay, parents to 3 children, including Ryan, 18, who was born with a rare genetic disorder, Prader-Willi Syndrome. We'll hear all about the Patay family, including how Jessica started a not-for-profit helping parents of kids with special needs. It's a fascinating story that we'll hear on this week's Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. Say hello now to host David Hirsch.
Hi, and thanks for listening to the Dad to Dad podcast, Fathers Mentoring Fathers of Children with Special Needs, presented by the Special Fathers Network.
The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children connect with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we'd be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad.
So let's hear this conversation now between David Hirsch and Chris and Jessica Patay.
I'm thrilled to be talking today with Jessica and Chris Patay of Rancho Palos Verdes, California, who are the parents of 3. I'd like to thank you for doing a podcast interview for the Special Fathers Network.
Hi, David. Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
The 2 of you have been married for 25 years and are the proud parents of 3, Luke, 21, Kate, 16, and middle child Ryan, 18, who was born with a rare genetic disorder known as Prader-Willi Syndrome. Let's start with some background. Jessica, where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
Sure. Thank you. I grew up in Los Alamitos, California, so Southern California native. And it's such a long story, a lot of siblings. I'm one of 10, but it's a Brady Bunch and more story and a very unique family. And I definitely appreciate all my siblings. Mainly grew up with my mom and my sister Jennifer in Los Alamitos. The other siblings are older, and yeah, it's a long story, but I then went on to a local university and then transferred out to Oklahoma. And then I had enough of Oklahoma and came back to California and started working.
Excellent. So you grew up in a blended family. That's what I heard you say.
Yes.
And lots of siblings. Out of curiosity, what did your dad do for a living?
My dad was a tax attorney in Los Angeles for many, many years.
And I'm assuming he's retired now?
Yes, he is.
Okay. And how would you describe your relationship with your dad?
Great question. I would say that my dad did the best that he could with how he was raised. He and my mom divorced when I was very little, but he always made sure that he was a part of our lives. So we were with him every other weekend, and he would drive from LA to Los Alamitos to take us out to dinner every week, every other week. He would bring some of my other half siblings along. He created family vacations and took us skiing every year. And, whichever half or step siblings could be a part of that trip, they were. And I'm grateful that he definitely made the effort, but he was not a father who emotionally poured into us. And so, I had to work through that, obviously, as I got older and became very much aware as you start to look at your own family when you're in college or post-college, and you kind of look at dynamics and relationships and what do I want for my life and marriage and family life, and you have to work through those things.
Well, thanks for being authentic and transparent about that. I'm wondering if there's something that you picked up from your dad that you've incorporated into your own parenting, something that, is directly result of the relationship you have with your dad?
Another great question. I don't know that anybody has ever asked me that, David, and I'm going to have to sit on that a little bit later. But what comes to mind is my dad was always affectionate upon greeting. And I don't know if that's, it seems like it was very much a part of the Jewish culture. My father is Jewish. Half my family is Jewish. And that always stood out to me. No matter how old we all got, all of us siblings, he was still would greet with a hug and a kiss. And so I think I try to be like that as a mom.
Yeah, well, thanks for sharing. So, Chris, let's go to your background. Where did you grow up? Tell me something about your family.
Sure. So I grew up in Palos Verdes, not too far from where we are now. It's my family background, sort of almost like opposite Jessica's. We kind of always joke about. Yeah, I have, one brother, twin brother, and sister, fraternal twin brother, and kind of grew up in. Jessica used to always joke like the Beaver Cleaver sort of family home, and very close and still close to my brother and sister. My mom passed away about 14 years ago now. My dad just turned 80, and my brother, sister, and I just had recent privilege of going on a vacation together, just the four of us, for the first time in many years, which was nice.
And what did your dad do for a living?
He was an engineer, worked in aerospace industry, came out from Midwest to Southern California in the late 60s, like sort of classic stereotype story in the, as we call it, the South Bay here. Worked for TRW for many years.
If I remember, the family was from Pekin, Illinois.
Yes, Pekin, that's right. Pekin, Illinois. My dad's family, they were Hungarian refugees that came over after World War II. I think my dad was 9 years old when he first came to the U.S., not speaking English, and them starting life over, and fortunately had the opportunity in this country to do so.
Yeah, well, the only reason I remember that is that the only reason I know where Pekin, Illinois is, it's in central Illinois. And I would pass it on my way to school, driving to college and back at the University of Illinois in Champaign. Yeah, it's a real community, not the big city like Chicago or LA or something like that. So it is a little bit of the American dream, right?
Right.
Immigrants, refugees come to the U.S., start their lives over, and they make something of themselves. It's always uplifting to hear there's another story like that. So thanks for sharing. So I'm sort of curious to know, how would you characterize your relationship with your dad?
I'd say it grew over the years, and probably I'd have to say after my mom's passing, it probably became much closer. Growing up, my dad worked a lot. He was more reserved. My mom was sort of the one that kind of ran the household and, organized everything. And my brother and I, we had a few, special trips with my dad, just, the three of us. But I'd say he was, fairly reserved. And growing up, I felt like he was a little more emotionally reserved. But it's interesting. It seems like he's much more tender and emotional in the last, decade or two. And, and after my mom passed away, it was a hard time for him. It was a hard time for us. And I think, there was some, experience in that sort of that pain that kind of in some sense, during that time drew us closer.
Yeah. Well, sorry to hear that your mom passed at such an early age, and that it seems like your relationship may have evolved as a result of that, right? Your dad is playing both roles.
Right.
Where he could probably just have hung back and been like most dads of his generation, just to be the provider and more traditional dad, and mom runs the household, and as the, point person for, keeping in contact with children and organizing things. Well, let's switch gears and talk about special needs, first on a personal level and then beyond. And I'm sort of curious to know, prior to Ryan's birth, if either of you had any exposure to the special needs community.
I did not.
Yeah, and I did not.
I've had a longtime college best friend who had young girls with autism. but she was across the country. So I didn't have anybody in my immediate world. But that was my first exposure, I would say.
So Ryan is your second child, middle child. How did his diagnosis come about, and what is Prader-Willi syndrome?
Who wants to answer?
Yeah, I don't take it. Well, maybe actually you can describe your pregnancy and how.
Well,
let's
yeah,
start.
Normal pregnancy, normal labor and delivery. And when he was born, you know how newborns let out that, horrible scream, oh my goodness, right? When they're born. And his cry only lasted 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 seconds, maybe. And I remember thinking, well, maybe I got an easy newborn, because Luke, our first, had his days and nights mixed up, got kicked out of the nursery, he cried a lot. And so I just remember when Ryan was born that stood out to me. And, quickly that first day, the professionals were telling us, this is going on, this is going on, this is going on. I was still kind of in that like ooey gooey fog and so excited to meet Ryan that I didn't realize the gravity of the situation until the next day when they said, we're going to run a CT scan, we're going to run an ultrasound, we're going to run blood, or all this stuff. Then it got really serious. So Ryan was born with hypotonia, low muscle tone. We spent a month in the hospital not knowing what was wrong. And this was before smartphones. So I lived at the hospital with my flip phone, and Chris was at home able to Google things. And he looked up a few of the symptoms that Ryan had: failure to thrive, hypotonia, some other medical issues. And he found Prader-Willi syndrome. And he asked the doctors to test. And we had several people say, well, he doesn't look like it, because there is a look in PWS, not as significant as Down syndrome. And Chris said, well, that's okay. Just test away, because we don't have any answers and it's a simple blood test. So we were able to go home after a month with a feeding tube. And a week later, we received the diagnosis from our pediatrician confirming that he had Prader-Willi syndrome. And so right away, all the early interventions started. Physical therapy, occupational therapy, focused on feeding, because Ryan couldn't suck. He didn't cry. He didn't cry for food. And he was very sleepy and hardly moved. And then I think we started speech therapy by 1 year. And so the early years are all about milestones: gross motor, fine motor, speech. Certainly for Ryan, feeding was a big focus the first year. It took him a year before he could get off the feeding tube and not need it anymore. I was say, then when we read about the syndrome, I'll let you jump in about some of the other symptoms.
I know it's kind of ironic that when he was that little, he had trouble eating, because one of the most distinct features of Prader-Willi syndrome is a lack of satiety or feeling full that leads to basically insatiable appetite. And so without proper, diagnosis and being attuned to that, left sort of unchecked, most people with Prader-Willi syndrome would end up becoming morbidly obese and struggle with a, severe eating disorder. So, we sort of, in those very early days, struggled to get him to eat as much as he could. But, since then have been needing to be very careful on sort of a regulated food schedule and also access to food. The eating component is just, sort of one element. And by the way, Prader-Willi syndrome, it is like a rare genetic disorder that I think affects maybe 1 in 15,000 or so individuals, affecting chromosome 15. And it's a spectrum. There's some very high functioning, others that, struggle in more severe ways. And I'd say when most people meet Ryan, he's fortunately through, I think a lot of hard work, he's, very thin and active now. And, when people meet him, he looks great, but he has a, social sort of awkwardness, and intellectual functioning is down a bit. So, I think most people would say it looks like he has autism, or kind of, think that he's sort of on the spectrum. And that's sort of the initial reaction. But he's doing well.
Yeah. So, the early years are definitely the milestones. And then you start to wonder, when is that food drive going to hit in childhood? And for Ryan, it didn't hit till he was 13 it was a slow burn. Let me say that. There was a slow increased interest in food. We did not have to lock the kitchen till he was 13, and we didn't have to get vigilant, like ever watchful on the kitchen that it's locked at all times. And then sometimes I'll even check in the middle of the night if I'm up, until he was 16. And so kids or adults with PWS, no matter how well we do as parents in terms of regulating, having a food schedule, watching, they will never be able to self-regulate. So they will have to be watched 24/7 for the rest of their lives until, an amazing, miraculous breakthrough in research comes about to help that food drive, because it is life-threatening. Ryan has a lot of anxiety. I would say his anxiety and behaviors are probably harder than the food drive, although the food drive definitely has altered our life and our family life quite a bit. He's a sweetheart. He's compassionate. He asks great questions. Yesterday morning, he said, out of the blue, because I was doing his morning routine. So this is 6:30 in the morning. Ryan says, "What makes a good marriage?" Where did that come from?
Yeah.
Where did that come from?
Day before Valentine's.
And then he's also the kid that will fall apart because you asked him to, I don't know, move his stuff, right?
Yeah.
So
we say I think his emotions are high all the time. He's really high in excitement, really high in enthusiasm, or if he's upset, he's extremely upset. So that's very one definitely unique feature. So there's sort of highs, it can be highs and lows as we navigate him throughout the day.
I want to go back to early on, that first month or so. And if I heard correctly, Chris, you were the one that somehow stumbled across the Prader-Willi Syndrome, in some Google searching that you were doing. So is it accurate to say that that is not a standard test that hospitals do?
It's not. It's in part of the reason is that, forgive me, this was 18 years ago today. Maybe the tests are a little bit different, but to really diagnose, it requires a very specialized test. So it's not one that can be just thrown into a panel and, and there's different levels. There's, without getting complicated, there's a sort of a basic and a much more intensive. And so I think it's not part of the standard feature. And I think it's only, back then it was only tested if there was high suspicion because of, only a few labs that would test for it. And, and I think back then, looking back at those first couple of months, I mean, I was, like any parent, sort of panicked. What's going on? We need answers. And, being a very sort of take control kind of person, I thought, I'll find the answer if the doctors can't find the answer. And, I remember spending like sleepless nights, making a giant list of every rare disorder and looking at all the symptoms and possibilities and trying to deduce, there's got to be an answer somewhere. And, there were just, a handful of things that kind of came out. That was just happened to be one of them. And until you can rule it out, why not consider it?
Yeah, well, it sounds like it's almost like divine intervention that you would find out at such an early point in Ryan's life, what it is. Because based on what you're saying, it seems like a lot of individuals who are born with Prader-Willi syndrome would go undiagnosed for not just weeks or months, but maybe for months or years.
Yes.
And I don't know that the therapy would be any different, right? If there's certain symptoms, you're going to seek therapies that are going to address those symptoms. But I think it's rather advantageous to know from a relatively early age, what is you're up against. And I'm wondering if there's some important advice that you got early on that you can sort of trace back to that early diagnosis that puts you on the path that you've been on.
Well, I think I'm grateful that Chris did the research that he did, because he found the Prader-Willi California Foundation and the Prader-Willi Syndrome Association in Florida. And so because he had knowledge of those organizations, as soon as we got that phone call from our pediatrician, the very next day, he contacted both organizations. And within a day or two, I received a phone call from my first mentor mom, Lisa Graziano. And so having a diagnosis puts you on a particular path. It frames things. I think it provides relief. And it provides a little bit of fear and worry, because now you know what it is and what you're grappling with and dealing with. Any diagnosis, any rare diagnosis is not easy to swallow. And yet we then also had a community to plug into, which saved us. We jumped into our first support group when Ryan was 2 months old.
Yeah, I think I think absolutely. That was probably one of the biggest benefits is, the first, I have to say the first month was probably, it was one of the hardest months, of my life. You go through these feelings like, oh my gosh, is my life over? How are we going to get through this? You especially reading the, severity and the impact and long-term, I think, this is going to be our life. It was hard. And, I remember having a friend back then when I was in my total mess said, the hardest thing you're going through right now is, you're shifting expectations. You had a vision of what life would be like and what life would be like with Ryan, with a second son. And, you're now, having to shift, your thoughts and dreams for the future. And, that's a painful process. And that's absolutely right. And I think getting involved in the community and the Prader-Willi, California Foundation was a giant step forward sort of in that initial healing. And I remember going to the first support group meeting thinking, oh my gosh, we're going to show up and everyone's going to be like down and depressed and like, miserable, faces and all sharing like, how everybody's lives are just a mess. And then in particular, I remember coming in and seeing, to this day, as one of our become really close friends, we celebrate our anniversaries now together, but this couple of the Greskoviches, they walk in and they're smiling and laughing and joking around, saying hi to everybody. And I'm thinking, why are they so happy? They're so, they have so much joy. And I remember it was sort of in that moment thinking, I think, it's going to take time, but, we're going to get through this. And, a community does that and having, pleasantly say, we have a lot of joy now and a lot of joy with that community.
Yeah, well, I think having role models, positive role models, like what I heard you describe with is it Greskos? How do you pronounce the name?
Greskovic. Another Hungarian family.
Right. It gives you an insight, right? It's not all darkness. It's not all, oh my gosh, what are we going to do? They're embracing life, right? They're not going to let this hold them back. And it's like you've taken a page out of their playbook, and hopefully, others have taken a page out of your playbook as well. You're not parents to one child, Ryan, you're parents to 3 children. And you have to be focused on what's in the best interest of your whole family, not just the best interest of the one with, maybe more demanding needs. So anyway, it's very uplifting when I hear stories like yours. And not to focus on the negative, but what do you consider some of the bigger challenges? You've made reference to the vigilance that goes along with food. And that is one of the big issues that somebody with Prader-Willi syndrome, is going to have to be aware of. Or those that are caretakers for somebody with Prader-Willi syndrome are going to have to be aware of. You also mentioned his anxiety and that his emotions seem to run, at extremes. That's what I heard you say. It's like a switch on or off. It's not like in the middle. It's like, like you said, highs and lows. Have there been any other challenges that come to mind?
I think just anxiety and behaviors in general, and learning how to manage that, learning how to respond, learning how to not get triggered. And sometimes we get triggered and sometimes we don't. Sometimes we're zen and sometimes we're not. We've learned a lot through the years from behaviorists. We've found amazing behaviorists to be a part of our family and a part of our team for Ryan. And the food drive is tough. I wish, though, if I had to eliminate one piece of PWS, it probably would be the anxiety, which leads to behaviors.
Definitely a disruption on family life, I think is hard.
For sure.
Yeah. Now he needs a lot of constant care. He can't be alone. And so, we're even just chatting the other day how it's, you envision kids getting to a certain age as couples, and he lives at home with us where, we're free to go out and spontaneous, do anything, anytime. And that's just not our story. And, and we haven't been able to take a vacation with just the five of us in quite a while. It's traveling with him it's very challenging for him. It's too stressful for him. It's too anxiety provoking, and being away from like kind of home and routine. So there's things on that we still kind of feel a loss for. But
Sure.
we just need to create a different sort of family story and experience for our other two kids. And, but that's definitely been one challenge.
I would also add just the impact on siblings is a great impact. And I want them to be recognized. And I want parents to hear that. And I have a lot to say about that on another episode, another time. But Luke and Kate are amazing human beings. They are so compassionate. They are so patient. They are resilient. And it does take a hit to their lives. And for that, I wish I could take the hit, but then keep all the personal, beautiful human growth that it does provide for them.
I remember listening to one of the episodes where you interviewed Kate
Yes.
on your podcast. Mm-hmm. And I think she was 15 at the time. I could be off a little bit. Mm-hmm. And I thought, this sounds like one of the most mature 15-year-olds I've ever heard in my entire life. She just seemed to be so at ease and be able to reflect on things that, I'm not accustomed to. We have 5 adult children. They're 25 to 32. So, been there, done that, going through the teenage phase. And I thought, wow, the two of you are really getting it right there. If Kate is any demonstration or example of your parenting, it's like, wow, you hit one out of the park there.
Aww.
Thank you.
Thank you.
She's a special kid. She's a great kid.
Yeah.
And I can't speak to Luke because I don't remember you interviewing Luke, or maybe I missed the episode where you interviewed Luke. So I am always curious to know the impact that if there's an individual in the family that has special needs, what the impact has been to their siblings, on their marriage, or the extended family for that matter. I'm wondering what impact Ryan's had on your extended families.
Yeah, good question. Gosh, it's hard to know without, knowing what it'd be like any different. But they all love him, which is great. Very patient, I think, requires extra patience, and been, great supports. I think it's, it can be challenging because even like family get-togethers, with my brother and sister, we try to find times to all get together like once a year. And one challenge is that, doing so with Ryan takes, everybody has to somehow accommodate, in some way. And, that can not always be the easiest to navigate, if everybody has a vision on what they'd like to do, but, we just think, sorry, it's just not going to work with Ryan. So, it does impact, sort of extended family in different ways, but for on both sides of the family, everyone's been so gracious,
accepting and supportive. And we try to host as much as possible because we can control the kitchen. Mm-hmm. I'm not, telling my sister-in-laws, can you please put away the food, So it's just easier to kind of host here. I love doing that anyways, but it's just easier with whether it's my side or Chris's side to host because I can control the whole food situation.
Yeah, well, thanks for the transparency about that. I just want to make sure that we haven't overlooked any supporting organizations, ones that your families relied on, or more specifically for Ryan's benefit. You made reference to the Prader-Willi Syndrome Association, which is the Florida organization?
Yes.
The national organization in Florida?
Yes. You
mentioned the Foundation for Prader-Willi Research.
We didn't mention, but that it is an organization that exists and is doing amazing work conducting research. It's all research. So I'm grateful for that, for sure. I would say the organization that's had the greatest impact on us is the Prader-Willi California Foundation.
Yeah, the
PWCF.
Yeah, the other one wasn't around when we were first, when Ryan was diagnosed, or it was very early days. So so we haven't been as involved with Foundation for Prader-Willi Research,
No.
but the Prader-Willi California Foundation has really been sort of almost like home community. We've both been on the board of it. I was on the board for many years.
The resources, the education, the advocacy, we've just received so much that has impacted our daily life. That has helped.
And I have to say, Jess mentioned her first mentor, Lisa Graziano, was the executive director for many years. And she was the one who first really greeted us into the Prader-Willi family world. And it's a story I always love to tell when, this was like, days after diagnosis. And we're trying to get a handle on it and still a wreck. We receive a voicemail. And, first words I still remember were, "Hi, Chris and Jessica. This is, Lisa Graziano from California, or Prader-Willi California Foundation. I just want to say congratulations on the birth of your son." And, I still get choked up hearing that because, at the time, we had not heard congratulations at all since the day he was born. This was maybe 11 weeks later?
Oh,
15?
no, like 6 weeks.
6 weeks? Okay, yeah, lose track.
It was early.
But, for the last 6 weeks, it was all panic. And I think for, family and friends, they don't really know what to say, in those early years when they know you're, something bad is going on. So it's all, I'm sorry, I'm sorry. And, how's everything going? And so, just to hear that, it really, I don't even remember what else she said. It was, just struck me saying like, this is a life to celebrate, this is
exactly.
And of course it drew me. I thought, who is this person? I want to find out and get to know. And that phone call was actually even I think a turning point in sort of the change in how we came to accept and mindset.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting you should mention that because from what I can ascertain from what you just shared, she has the license to say congratulations. Not that anybody else couldn't have said congratulations on the birth of your son.
Right.
That's just something you'd expect to hear. But knowing what you were going through and sort of the challenges that, you were up against, somebody had already been there and done that, right? Somebody who's a part of the community, has a license with the highest level of authenticity to say congratulations and with the high level of sincerity. Knowing what that entails. So I think of people like her as being the angels, right, in our lives, who are there at prescient times so that they are able to, help you make that shift, right, that mind shift that is really important because unfortunately, not everybody has people that speak into their lives like that. And so early, like you were saying, if that was the first couple months, right? What a blessing it was or is that you formed this relationship. And it sounds like it's a lifeline.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
For sure. Absolutely. It's really.
In a prior conversation, I think you also mentioned the Harbor Regional Center.
Yes.
Is playing an important role in your family's life as well.
Yeah. Yes. Harbor. I'm currently on the board and actually currently serving as president of Harbor Regional Center. And essentially in California, we have something called the Lanterman Act, which is, the act that basically governs the provision of resources to persons with disabilities in California. There's regional centers throughout the state. Harbor Regional Center serves the southwest area of Los Angeles. It's been a great organization. They're also one that contacted us very early on. Ryan got Harbor Regional Center qualified for services. And I remember not, being so naive and ignorant, wondering, does insurance, do you take insurance or how do, is there what's the deductible fee? How does this work? And they're all, no, it's, just, we're here to provide services to help, support. So it became, an important resource. That and obviously the school system as well. We have a fabulous special ed program and teams here in our area. So, at some point I thought, I'd like to get involved and have been for a few years now.
Mm-hmm.
Excellent. Well, we'll be sure to include information on each of these organizations in the show notes, just so people are curious to learn more about it. It'll make it as easy as possible for them to follow up.
We'll be back with more of the conversation on the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast in just a few moments. But first, this quick message. Please help 21st century dads gather research on families raising children with special needs by having them complete the Special Fathers Network Early Intervention Parents Survey. A link to the survey can be found in the show notes. As a token of our appreciation, each person, mom or dad, who completes the survey will receive a Great Dad coin. Thank you. Now, back to the conversation.
So let's switch gears and talk about We Are Brave Together. And from what I remember, it was started in 2017, and sort of being a numbers nerd, that would have been when Ryan was maybe 13 years old, 5 years ago.
He was just 13. Mm-hmm.
So that seems sort of audacious to be starting a not-for-profit organization, Jessica. And I'm wondering what the backstory is there and how this amazing organization that you've created came into existence.
You're not the first person to say that, because Kate was 11 at the time, or 10 at the time. And I had sweet friends say, your kids are still young. How are you going to do this? Why now? Why not wait until, your youngest is in college, per se? I just had to. I had been wanting for years to do something for moms, caregiving moms. We don't really say special needs moms anymore, do we? I don't know. That's what I used to call them. I always wanted to do something because I had benefited so greatly from the community of moms that walked the journey with me, whether they were within the Prader-Willi world or within my school district. And I believe so strongly in the friendship of women, and that when women come together and leave behind cattiness, competition, and comparison, that they have so much to offer each other. And I wanted that for other women. I wanted other moms to feel like they weren't alone, that they had a sense of belonging, that they would be validated in their unique, brutal, beautiful journeys. And so I just had to do something. And I was just kind of sitting on that desire. And then it all came together because I had started doing these fluffy girlfriends retreats with my best friend from college, Kimberly Coy. And we turned to each other in the spring of 2016 and said, this is really fun and this is great to put on these little intimate retreats, but it's expensive. And so where could we actually meet a need with this idea of having a weekend away of fun and inspiration and a mommy break? And we dreamed up We Are Brave Together. That name was birthed at that time because when women come together and support each other, they can go back into their crazy lives and be braver. And knowing when you're a part of a community and you hear each other's stories, you connect and you realize, oh, they're being brave in their everyday life. I can be brave in my everyday life. I see you rising up. I can rise up. And so it was birthed. And
Can I
go ahead. Yeah. What's your perspective?
Well, I think the other thing, I think wouldn't you also say, because I still remember you'd started a blog too. And,
That's true.
And it started being very authentic and talking about the joys and the struggles of being a mom, raising a child with special needs and being very honest. And I think
that's true. That was a contributing factor.
And I think one thing that kind of came out of it was how many people started reaching out and really, really resonating with what you were saying. And some, from around the world. I remember you were saying someone contacted me from Russia, wanting to, talking to me or commenting on something. And I think that also kind of sparked the need, like, wow, it's hitting a chord that really speaks to moms having a, sort of a tribe, a community that where you're able to kind of be real and be authentic and grow together.
For sure. Thank you for saying that, because that definitely gave me a voice. It gave me confidence because I was being so bold and so vulnerable. that, sometimes I would just cringe sometimes at what I would share, but then I would get a text message, then I would get a Facebook message, then I would get an Instagram message, and somebody would say, thank you for saying how I feel and putting words to my journey. And I'm so afraid to say it out loud. So thank you for being my voice. And so that definitely was part of the foundation of my confidence to move forward, for sure.
Would it be reasonable to say that between the blog and this retreat or getaway experience that you described, was that therapeutic?
Yes. Therapeutic and cathartic.
Okay.
For sure.
Yeah, well, a lot of ideas are just simple ideas that have some very modest or humble beginnings. And I'm wondering, how has that evolved? What's the scope of the program that you have today?
Well, our mission from the beginning is still the same mission today, and that is to combat the isolation and compassion fatigue and burnout that moms face by providing support groups, education, and retreats. And then since then, we were able to start a podcast in the middle of COVID. May 2020, we launched Brave Together podcast.
This is Jessica Patay, your host for Brave Together podcast. I am here to serve, encourage, and inspire you in your journey as a special needs mom. This is your tribe. This is your community, your place to be reminded that you are not alone. Follow along as I share stories, inspiration, and resources just for you.
And we just hope to really grow all of those areas. We now have satellite support groups in different spots in the United States, and we are in New Zealand and Australia, and hope to have more international support groups as well. We have an international membership for sure. We probably have 1,600 moms and represent 45 states in the United States and about 15 countries. And I think that will just grow because the need is there for moms to feel like they're not alone and to have non-judgmental, loving, sacred support among women who get it. Moms who want to be a part of the community of We Are Brave Together can just go to our website and join. They'll get our newsletters, they'll get our announcements, they'll get our detailed emails about our retreats.
Yeah, well, remember, our listening audience is mostly dads who are raising kids with special needs.
Yes.
And Chris, perhaps maybe from your perspective, you can provide the testimonial that our dads, our listeners, would want to have as far as signing their wives up, signing the mother of their children up for these We Are Brave Together retreats.
I think it's obviously, as a husband and wife, we both have, vested interest in pouring into our kids. I think, most recognize there's sort of a special burden that gets placed on moms raising a child with a disability. One thing that, I know that has come through it, and you've heard quite a bit, is just how much it has met a deep need inside of women and that have attended and the moms that have attended. And, that benefits the entire family. There's nothing you want more than, as a dad and as a husband, a wife to, get the support she needs, and if struggling to find that connection to get it. And, the best way you can help take care of, a person with a disability is to make sure, the caregivers are in a place where they're equipped and capable, emotionally and have that inner, strength to do so successfully. And, and I think that's one big part of it. And, as a husband, not going, it's definitely, been a tremendous, help for Jessica, and we all benefit from it.
Yeah, well, the way I think about it, and again, I'm just sort of a financial nerd about it, is that it's not an expense, it's an investment. And if it's $200, it seems like a very small price to pay for an investment that, is going to have significant upside and will pay dividends for weeks and months to come.
Absolutely.
It is. And could I add something that to the dads out there listening? I think it's very hard for some women to ask for help. It is very hard for them to say, honey, to their spouse, could you take on the responsibilities for 48 hours or longer if you're a mom who has to fly across the country to attend our retreat? It's very hard for moms to ask for help because they've been sent the message that you should be a martyr. You should give all of yourself to your children and your family and not think of yourself because that is selfish. And that's just cultural indoctrination. And I know moms mean well, but they forget themselves and they're afraid to ask for help. And I think, though, the message that we say in We Are Brave is you are worthy of taking care of yourself. But the other thing, too, is your family is worthy of taking over for the weekend and having your confidence in them that they can handle it without you. So I feel like it's a win-win. I think it gives dads confidence, like, look what I did this weekend, right? I took over, right? Mm-hmm. I did this, or the other siblings that might help out that weekend or what have you. I think it's empowering for the dads, and you're giving dads an opportunity to gain that confidence in caregiving if they're not hands-on. Chris is very hands-on. I can leave and he seamlessly can take over. We've just operated this way from the beginning. I am eternally grateful that he's hands-on, and I've always asked for help because there were other things that I needed outside of family life, to go for a run, to have a girls' trip away. And for moms, it's not easy to ask for that. So I encourage you to ask your wives, do you want a break?
Yeah, well, I think it's great advice.
You need a break.
Thank you for sharing. I've heard it said similarly that it's important to be selfish before you can be selfless. So it's important to take that sort of step to take care of yourself, right? So you can bring your A game before you can be selfless. I don't know that it's a martyr, but I know exactly what you're saying is that, there's an expectation in society that, moms are just going to suck it up and do whatever it takes.
Yeah. It's really like the airplane analogy, when the face mask, oxygen masks come down, if you don't put yours on, you're not going to be able to help the person, next to you.
It's true.
Exactly. So I'm wondering if there's any other advice, just pulling back, not We Are Brave Together advice, but just advice that you might share with a listener that goes beyond the scope of what we've already discussed.
I think because when you're caregiving, it's added stress, added exponential stress and responsibilities and heaviness, that couples therapy and family therapy are important, and not because you're in crisis mode. If you get to crisis mode, for sure. But I would say, we've done check-ins through the years. We've made sure, we still don't think it's enough, but we have had date nights away, even at a hotel 15 minutes away, just for us, 24 hours. And in recent years, we've started family therapy, which I would highly recommend early on in the journey before the siblings can say, no, I don't want to go. That's not cool. We've learned so much the last couple of years from Luke and Kate, and I'm so grateful that they have been willing to go and to be honest. And, there are definitely things I wish I could rewrite in terms of family dynamics, but we've learned a lot. And so I would just encourage any parents out there listening to, if that's a resource they can tap into, to look into it. It's really helpful.
Excellent advice. And I think it's under the banner of reaching out for help. Don't think that there's a stigma or a weakness associated with that, right? There's professionals, right, who have got all the experience in the world, who will help you see things or understand things that you might not be able to because of the day-to-day. So it's excellent advice. So I'm wondering if there's anything else you'd like to say before we wrap up.
Not that I can think of. I mean, other than thank you. It's great chatting and having the opportunity to share a story. And So really appreciate and what you do too. It's, your podcast is fabulous, and, feel, blessed to be able to be a part of it.
For sure. Thank you for this opportunity. It's fun to do this together. So I appreciate that, David. And thank you for pouring into the world of dads.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to ask you a question. How do we help more dads recognize that they need their own unique support too in this world?
It's a great question. I would say that they just need to be in the presence of other dads who have been there and done that. And whether that's on their own or tapping into local resources in their community, and short of that, listening to podcasts, watching some of the videos that we've produced on the dozens of topics that dads tell us that are important to them.
Mm.
And beyond the sort of engaged, sort of on their own, listening in the creature comforts of your car or your office, or watching a video when time allows, is just, time that you're investing in yourself. But I think it is important to be in the presence of other guys. And we have a series of beat-up groups that we're establishing around the country and a few outside the country.
Oh, good.
And then we actually have a mastermind group where these guys get together on a weekly basis. And along the lines of making investments, the dads that are involved in our mastermind group, which is now over a year old, are paying $100 a month, right? $1,200 a year for the benefit of getting together for 75 minutes a week on Wednesday nights from across the country. And it's magic, really, the conversations that are taking place. These are virtual conversations, right? They're done on Zoom. And then we also have the concept of a retreat, an annual retreat for those that are involved with our mastermind. They get themselves there and we cover all the expenses, the food, the shelter, accommodations, and the extracurricular activities that we have planned, including, outside speakers that come in. So we're doing the same type of work as you are. We're just taking it sort of like from the dad's angle versus the mom's angle.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm hoping that our paths will continue to cross and that we can cross-pollinate what we're doing, because no doubt there's a number of dads that are connected to the moms in your network. And obviously there are a number of moms connected to the dads in our network. And, we just have to educate people about the different resources that are available.
Yes.
Absolutely.
Yes, absolutely.
So let's give a special shout out to our mutual friend, Effie Parks of Once Upon a Gene, for introducing us.
She's so fantastic. I got to meet her in person when she was in California, and it was golden.
Absolutely. So if somebody wants to learn more about We Are Brave Together or contact you, what's the best way to do that?
They can go to we-are-brave-togehter.org and see all our offerings. We're on Instagram at we-are-brave-togehter. You can certainly reach out to me personally at jpatay@we-are-brave-togehter.org.
Okay. We'll be sure to include that in the show notes so it'll be easy as possible for people to reach out to you.
Okay, great.
Jessica and Chris, thank you for taking the time and many insights. As a reminder, Jessica and Chris are just two of the individuals who are part of the Special Fathers Network, a mentoring program for fathers raising a child with special needs. If you'd like to be a mentor father or are seeking advice from a mentor father with a similar situation to your own, please go to 21stcenturydads.org. Thank you for listening to the latest episode of the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. I hope you enjoyed the conversation as much as I did. As you probably know, the 21st Century Dads Foundation is a 501c3 not-for-profit organization, which means we need your help to keep our content free to all concerned. Would you please consider making a tax-deductible contribution? I would really appreciate your support. Jessica and Chris, thanks again.
Thank you.
And thank you for listening to the Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast. The Special Fathers Network is a dad-to-dad mentoring program for fathers raising children with special needs. Through our personalized matching process, new fathers with special needs children match up with mentor fathers in a similar situation. It's a great way for dads to support other dads. To find out more, go to 21stcenturydads.org.
And if you're a dad looking for help or would like to offer help, we would be honored to have you join our closed Facebook group. Please go to facebook.com/groups and search Dad to Dad. Lastly, we're always looking to share interesting stories. If you'd like to share your story or know of a compelling story, please send an email to david@21stcenturydads.org.
The Special Fathers Network Dad to Dad podcast was produced by me, Tom Couch. Thanks again to Horizon Therapeutics, who believe that science and compassion must work together to transform lives. That's why they work tirelessly to research, develop, and bring forward medicines for people living with rare and rheumatic diseases. Discover more about Horizon Therapeutics at horizontherapeutics.com.